And good evening from Link NKY World Headquarters in downtown Covington. I'm Michael Monks, and this is the Frankfort Link Live, where we talk about the way issues in our state's capital affect us here in Northern Kentucky and across the state. As always, I'm joined by Link NKY government and politics reporter Mark Payne, who is in Frankfort for the duration of the 2022 Kentucky General Assembly session. Mark, thank you for being with us, and thank you for your continued reporting on the legislature.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
And we'll get a quick update on the week that was in Frankfort from Mark coming up. We also have the pleasure of being joined tonight by two Northern Kentucky lawmakers. Republican Adam Koenig of Erlanger is a state representative and is with us. Representative Koenig, we appreciate you being with us again.
Thanks for having me.
And Democrat Buddy Wheatley, state representative of Covington. Representative Wheatley, welcome to you also.
My pleasure, Michael. Thanks for having me.
And if you are watching live on the Link NKY Facebook page and you've got a question or a comment or a thought, just leave it in the comments section. And at some point throughout the duration of this program, we'll either address them ourselves or pose them to the lawmakers who have joined us this evening. And now let's get going. Mark Payne, was this another busy week in the state capitol?
It was, Michael. It's going to be a lot of busyness over the next few weeks as the session winds up, as it is scheduled to end on April 14th. A lot of bills are moving through both chambers, the Senate and the House, and they're going to continue to move. The big news this week is that the Senate gave their version of the budget, and it took two big crucial steps on Wednesday. So first, the Senate Appropriations and Revenue Committee, which is chaired by Senator Chris McDaniel, a Republican from Taylor Mill. It went through the committee on Wednesday morning, and then it passed the Senate floor on Wednesday afternoon, and it now heads back to the House, where it probably won't get approved right away, but it's likely to get approved here soon. They'll likely go to a conference committee. Either way, what happens, the final draft of this year's budget is going to look a lot like the Senate and House budgets. With having supermajorities in both the Senate and the House, they're going to have full control of the budget.
Well, let me ask you this, Mark, because we'll get some perspective from our members of the House who are with us today on how that process works and what they see as far as possible changes to it. But the Senate has done what it's done with this budget, and there were some pretty significant items in there, such as $200 million on the table for the Brent Spence Bridge corridor project.
Yeah, so the Senate budget is going to have $200 million. That's different than what the governor proposed in his budget, which was $250 million. It still kind of leaves a lot of questions unanswered as far as how the Brent Spence is going to get funded. That project is expected to cost $2.8 billion. So if you subtract, 2.8 minus 200, you're still looking at $600 million. And when Governor Mike DeWine and Governor Andy Beshear met last Monday at the Northern Kentucky Convention Center to sign this memorandum of understanding, Governor Mike DeWine was kind of unclear about if there was going to be any funding from Ohio. So it does leave some questions. But, everyone I've talked to, and I think the lawmakers that we have on tonight will agree with me, I think it's a bipartisan thing that really the lawmakers want to get passed. And it's a huge project. It's been a huge topic in Northern Kentucky for a long time. And I think it's important to point out too, that it's an election year this year and next year. So I think a lot of politicians really want to get this project over the line.
All right, let's turn to our members of the State House who are with us today. Representative Adam Koenig, Republican of Erlanger. I know you're in the House, but you probably keep a little bit of an eye on what's going on in the upper chamber of the General Assembly. They've done their work on the state budget. Do you anticipate significant changes, especially as it relates to that bridge project?
Well, I hear that the Senate made significant changes to the House budget, and I'm sure some of that is policy differences. Some of that is giving themselves some things to negotiate with. Sometimes you need to create leverage, and I think everybody does that on both sides. Hopefully the $200 million for the bridge stays. In fact, I think we may actually need a little bit more than that. So maybe we can get that, but I think that's pretty exciting for Northern Kentucky. It's exciting for the bridge, and It's exciting for business growth and people growth in Northern Kentucky that we make that happen.
Representative Buddy Wheatley, Democrat of Covington. I know the Brent Spence Bridge is in your district right now. I'm not sure if it is next year in the redrawn district. I guess I'll have to take a look at that map again. But regardless, all the lawmakers who represent any part of Northern Kentucky have had their eye on this project for some time. Even though you're in the extreme minority party in Frankfort right now, does this look as promising as it sounds that Earth is going to move for the sake of this project?
I think I like extreme better than super minority, but we'll take extreme. But the short answer is yes, we are going to make this happen. And I can say that with some confidence because we are together in Northern Kentucky, the Northern Kentucky caucus related to this project. There's always some massaging on how exactly the funding will go. The governor's budget was a $250 million allocation directly from the general fund, which was cleaner. And, it was a little different than bringing $200 million out of transportation fund or the road fund. It was clean that way. And hopefully we'll come to our senses. And I say we, when the House minority gets in on the House conference and the conference committee to help make some final decisions. But the point is that I feel very confident is the funding will be there for this particular session to start the grant project or the grant funding that we need for this project. And we need to do it for the next 5 years. So these dollars come in over a 5-year period at least. And this is a big commitment. We hope Ohio is on board. I have a good feeling that they will be too. It's just too important, too big of an economic development, absolute generator. And we can't really mess around with it. I think we should be very clear. We got the dollars. We're going to put them in the grant pool and they're available and we're ready to go.
Mark Payne is Lincoln KY's government and politics reporter. He is live in Frankfort right now at 1NKY Frankfort. Mark, there was another Northern Kentucky project that was tossed around in this budget related to what has been called a wet lab for all of those life sciences companies like Gravity Diagnostics and the firms that you see in the biologic building on Russell Street in Covington. Have we heard any updates on that recently? I think that it was proposed by Governor Beshear that there should be about $10 million for the construction or the development of that wet lab to enhance the work of those life sciences organizations that were so critical during the COVID pandemic. What do we know about it now?
Yeah, so Governor Beshear proposed 10 million and the Senate budget proposes 15 million. So it's 5 million over what the governor's proposing. And it seems like, if that money comes for that wet lab, that it's going to come to fruition. There's a lot of folks that are involved in bringing that wet lab to life, Gravity Diagnostics, Bexion, NKU's involved, Northern Kentucky University's involved with it. So there's also a lot of folks that want to see that project done, and that can have a huge impact on the life sciences in Northern Kentucky.
You're watching the Frankfort Link live from Link NKY. I'm Michael Monks. And, we try to book these shows as quickly in advance as possible. And we try to get all of our different Northern Kentucky lawmakers an opportunity to join us to talk about legislation from their perspective. And I think we were told that in a couple of weeks, we might have some trouble because there's something called the legislative ball. Representative Koenig, what is this thing? Is this something where the legislators get all dolled up and go dancing? Really?
There is, I'm trying to remember what it's called. We haven't had it in a few years. I didn't realize, is it 2 Thursdays from now or something?
I think that's what Mark Payne said.
March 24th. March
24th. It's gosh, I forget what it's called, but yeah, it's a thing. It's at Frankfort Country Club. I've been maybe a couple times. It's kind of a Southern thing. They have the everyone creates a tunnel almost, and couples walk down through, and it's a spectacle. I might be willing to skip it to hang with you on a Thursday night.
All right,
be okay.
Can I have it?
We will keep that in mind. Was somebody going to say something? I'm sorry.
I was asking if Representative Koenig decides to skip it, can I have his ticket? And on that note, can you guys get me in somehow?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It's like, I want Mark, if we can't do the show, I want Mark Payne to be there taking photographs of whatever this might be.
I'm also of the, thinking how important Link NKY is now to getting the news to Northern Kentucky about Frankfort. I hope we have that opportunity a couple Thursdays from now. I'm not familiar with this thing.
Well, this is that's like day 45. That's a terrible day to have it. Or I'm sorry, 55. We'll almost be done, for gosh sakes.
Well, it sounds like a musical number from MAME, so we definitely want to be there to get some sort of photographs. And I bring it up at this point in the show because I was going to suggest, Representative Koenig, you've got extra reason to toast at such an event, don't you? A piece of legislation you've been championing for a long time related to sports betting seems to be a little more promising this year. Before we dive into the legislation and its current status, remind our viewers and Northern Kentuckians what you mean by sports betting.
Well, I mean, I think most everybody would understand it. It allows you to wager on sports as they do now in Indiana and Illinois and West Virginia and Tennessee, all border states. Ohio is legal, but not up and running yet. Where people used to have to go to Las Vegas in order to wager on sports. And I mean, March is one of the biggest 2-3 weeks periods when with college basketball coming up. Now we've gone from one state in the course of 4 years to 33 states in the District of Columbia where it's legal. And Kentucky, sadly, is not one of them, and I'm trying to rectify that.
Well, at the end of last month, you've brought that up again. Is this thing going to move forward this year?
I think next week will be a big week. I'm becoming more and more confident the more people I talk to. It's wildly popular across the state. Had a poll done, 65% are in favor, 26% opposed. When you tell them the money's going to the pension, that 65% turns into 74%. So I think that the message is getting through. I think after last year's historical horse racing machine vote, people who voted for it got very little pushback. And so I'm optimistic that it might move. And
Representative Wheatley, is this something that has support of Democrats in the chamber as well?
It does have support. It is something that's long overdue. It's strongly supported in Northern Kentucky. My polls have it above 80% in the area. It's not the Democratic Party on this one. And I think it's, I don't want to promise Representative Koenig 100%, but there's always things to make it better. And I was real encouraged when, I don't know if it was particularly my suggestion that said that the proceeds should go to the funding our pensions, but I'm thrilled that he did that, and that is a popular thing. It obviously it's time for us. It's time to bring this industry into regulation in the state. It's unregulated now with Representative Koenig has the dollars and the numbers, but there's lots of dollars being bent and going out of the state. So we want to bring it into the 21st century, and it's certainly the Democrats are on board with it.
So we're talking about bringing money into the state, and a measure that was discussed last week might result in less money, I suppose, coming into the state and people keeping more of their money. Mark Payne is Link NKY government and politics reporter, and the State House took its first steps to rid Kentucky of its income tax, right?
Yeah, that's been something that's been talked about all session. It's, Kentucky Republicans in both chambers have talked about, tax reform throughout the session. That's something that is also part of their budget. So the bill, House Bill 8, will slowly lower the income tax from 5%, which is where it sits at now, to 0, with the first 1% drop occurring January 1st, 2023. And so proponents of the bill say that obviously this is going to put more money in the pockets of Kentuckians, while opponents say it's, gonna, and I should add, Michael, that, while the income tax is going away, the goal to balance that budget is to raise the sales tax. And so there's going to be added sales tax on a lot of digital products such as Uber and, digital subscriptions or digital books, things like that. So opponents of the bill say, while the income tax is being lowered, the sales tax is going to increase and it's going to charge people, and in general, it's going to charge poor people. And this looks like a tax cut for more wealthy Kentuckians.
All right, let's get reaction from our lawmakers. We'll start with Representative Buddy Wheatley, the Democrat of Covington.
Yeah. Michael, I have a lot to say about this. I had a lot to say the day on the floor when it did pass. And I respect different philosophies on how we should generate and not generate, but how we bring in revenue to the state. The income tax brings in 40% revenue of the revenue that comes into the state, and we are in a surplus time. Very, very unusual. Maybe a couple generations since we've had this much of a surplus, which sounds like we can go ahead and make cuts. But when we make a 1% cut, as this bill does right from the start, it's $1.2 billion less the first year and every year after that. So while we have a bit of a surplus at this time and a reserve, and it's good to have the reserve, it's the people's money, and we should be the best stewards of it as possible. And there are different philosophies about, how much we should have in reserve. Should we invest it in areas of particularly infrastructure, talking about bridges and broadband and water and sewer projects, things that are long-term needs that are billions and billions of dollars of need in the state, but we're going to do an income tax reduction. The other part of it is that it's a simple fairness thing in my eyes. When you do start reducing the income tax at some point to equalize the revenue that's going to be coming in, you're going to have to raise other taxes. And we're not going to be able to even meet the basic needs of our schools and all of our road projects and all the other things that are just, the day-to-day operations of the state of Kentucky, unless we do something like that. So, on a fairness level, graduated income tax is something that I think is more fair. In other words, the people who are making $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 a year might pay a little bit more under that system. When you have a flat tax or no income tax, those taxes are just more aggressive. And that means it does affect lower income people on a greater level than it would higher income people. Just not fair.
Representative Adam Koenig is a Republican of Erlanger. Based on Mark Payne's reporting, this is a bill that would slowly lower income tax while raising the sales tax and add fees to other products, digital products, including digital news products. Explain yourself.
Well, there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, it's not raising the sales tax, it's broadening the base. There's many services that are exempted from the sales tax. And when we started this process in 2008, we added several services to more everyday services to the base and imposing the 6% sales tax on that. And it was actually revenue positive. This is probably not revenue positive per se, but we added a bunch of a bunch of sales, a bunch of products that the sales tax is going to go on. And those products are probably, it's fair to say, more utilized by upper income people, except of course for the digital news stuff, which everybody uses and more people should, of course. But we dropped the sales tax rate from 6 to 5% in 2018, and the economy has not been negatively affected. And we drop it to 4% under this bill on January 1. And then there is specific benchmarks that when they're met, only then does the sales tax go down.
Adam, just to quickly, you're saying sales, but you mean income tax.
I'm sorry, income tax. Thank you.
Go
I
ahead.
appreciate that. Thank you very much. Where the income tax goes down 3.5% at a time until it gets to zero. Now you look at Tennessee, Texas, Florida, they've all had a great deal of expansion. Tennessee, I think in the last 40 years, Kentucky and Tennessee had a very similar population, and something like in the last 40 years, they've had twice as many people in Tennessee as they have in Kentucky. If you look at an aerial photo of Fort Campbell, Kentucky, down in Christian County, just south of Hopkinsville, you see hardly anybody living in Kentucky. But Clarksville, Tennessee, right across the border, there's a zillion people there because they don't have to pay income taxes. You bring those people over, they may not be paying income taxes, but they're buying a home. They're going to the grocery store. They're going to the restaurant there. You know, Buddy mentioned the people are making $400,000, $500,000, and you know, frankly, if they have the ability, they live in Indiana where the income tax rate is lower. They live in Florida for 6 months and a day out of the year, so they don't have to pay income taxes. Let's make it so that people want to live here in Kentucky, spend their money in Kentucky, get the sales tax from those folks. We have to grow our population. I think we had negative growth last year for the first time ever in recorded history. You know, we got to bring people here if we want them to work. We got to make Kentucky an attractive place to live and work. And if they live here, they're going to spend money here. That money is going to multiply, and we're going to generate more revenue.
Michael, I'm glad my friend brought this up, and this is the thing that I talked about most on the floor was I don't know how many people you know from Ohio, you know from Indiana, you know whether they're moving or coming back, but I've never had anybody say, the income taxes, that's why I'm going to move to Tennessee or move to Ohio or move to Indiana, Indiana, Ohio have a little less income tax level. It is the whole tax package, and what you end up paying in Kentucky is the 18th friendliest state as far as taxes are concerned. And I asked the A&R chair, and he's very well versed in many things and many numbers. And I really like the graduated levels of revenues that have to come in before these income taxes levels drop. That's a fine program. But his answer basically for my question was, you know, what is the evidence that we're going to have people come to Kentucky because income taxes are lower? And what is the evidence? Where's some studies because it's been done in other areas? What, just show anything that you have. It can be anecdotal. And he just said, it's my intuitive sense. And intuitive senses aren't a really good reason to make a really broad change in your tax structure. So that's just my reply to the population growth. And we do need population growth. And some of those things that the chamber and the One NKY and Meet NKY have talked about expanding our diversity, increasing our educational opportunities. I can go on and on. I've done it before. I've done it on the floor, but I'm just not so sure that lowering our income tax rate will be a big attraction for people to the state. I hope they're right because there is a super majority there, and it looks like it's the way we're going.
Representative Koenig, did you want to reply?
Buddy, I will get my awesome NKU intern in when she comes back from spring break next week, and we'll see. I'll set her on a track to find some of those studies.
Okay.
We'll see what we can find.
And Mark Payne is Link NKY government and politics reporter, and you did a story on this effort to begin to remove the income tax from the state of Kentucky. And you included a comprehensive list of services that would see an increased sales tax or user fee. I apologize if I'm catching you off guard here, Mark, if you don't have that list in front of you. Could you tell our viewers about some of these areas that might see an increased sales tax or user fee?
I do not have that list in front of me, Michael. But I know that like you mentioned digital services, newspapers, Uber was some of them. So like ride service fees, I'm assuming that that would be applied to,
Well,
Uber Eats or DoorDash.
Airbnb is on your list. Airbnb, pleasure watercraft docking, event space rentals, valet and parking services, road and travel services, unsolicited telemarketing services. I think we can all agree that they can be taxed to hell and back for all we care. But as well as public opinion research. And so, Representative Koenig, these are I think if I understand, by working to eliminate the income tax, you're looking to replace that revenue with fees on these particular industries and services.
Exactly. And I'm trying to find the list, frankly. It's a big bill here. But yeah, like I said, and I'm not on appropriations or revenue. I'm busy trying to make the world safe for, gambling and alcohol consumption, and licensing and occupations committee that I chair. But I do believe that, if you want to get less of something, you tax it more. And by taxing income more, you're going to get less of it. And if there's just a lot of success across the country from states that have lowered or eliminated their income tax. And, like I said, I'll have my intern Orla, who hails from Plymouth, England, and came all the way to NKU to experience Northern Kentucky, look into it and help me get better versed on it.
I can share this, Michael. The 1% equals almost $1.2 billion, and the sales tax, the increases on the fees that are listed, is expected to bring in a little less than 200 million. So it's quite a disparity between what those new taxes will raise and what we're cutting. And that's already happened. That happens without any other thresholds that come into place. So that's going to be what's in place going forward if this this bill passes. So it's a little bit scary going forward once we get to future years if we don't quite raise the revenues that they're hoping the influx of people will be when we cut the income tax.
Mark Payne, let's move on to another topic now. You also reported in recent days about what has been characterized as an omnibus abortion bill. It passed a House committee. What can you tell us about that?
Yes, so that abortion bill, and I do not have that in front of me, Michael, and I'm going to pull it up, and I apologize for not having that in front of me. But it's essentially like looking at some other states and what they're doing as far as abortion bills going through. It is going to, and if you wouldn't mind coming back to me on that.
No,
question,
cool. House Bill 3.
Yeah,
This is House Bill 3 that we're
House
talking
Bill
about.
3.
It has
Yep.
5 main elements according to your reporting.
Yep.
Updating
Yes.
current law on parental consent for minors, dignified care for the remains of aborted fetuses, reporting abortion statistics, no taxpayer funding of abortion in Kentucky, and creating guidelines rather for using chemicals to abort the pregnancy. So this doesn't sound exactly like a ban or as extreme as some of the other legislatures across the country in efforts to curb access to abortion rights.
Yeah, and some of the things were in that bill were focused on male, if I remember correctly, kind of like two like at-home like male abortion chemicals that get mailed, and there's ectopic pregnancy, I think, was one of the issues with it. And as far as that's what they were looking at. So like the things that you listed as far as so creating guidelines for using chemicals to abort the pregnancy. There's like 2 chemicals involved in that. And then that's what that would look. But there was another abortion bill that went through committee today that would ban abortions, I believe, after 15 weeks. I could be wrong about that, but I believe that's what that abortion bill is about.
So there was another separate piece of legislation related to abortion that moved today.
Correct.
Okay. Representative Koenig, can you tell us anything about what Mark Payne just said, a bill that moved somewhat today related to abortion?
I read an article shortly before we got on here in another online digital service that it is a 15-week after which ban that is based upon the Mississippi ban that is sitting before the Supreme Court right now. And that's basically what I know about it.
Okay. What are, Representative Koenig, if you can, abortion is one of those topics that is with us every session, and that's true in legislatures across the country. But the debate over the right to an abortion has intensified, I think, over the past couple of years, with proponents of abortion rights growing concerned that that could go away in this country. What are the conversations like in Frankfort among lawmakers as it relates to abortion? Is this one of those issues that people seem unwilling to compromise on?
Well, I mean, anybody who's followed politics for any length of time, I think, knows that it is possibly the number one issue that divides the parties, probably. And so there's a lot of very a lot of people who have a lot of strong feelings on it, on both sides. And look, I'm pro-life, and have been voting that way. These are not bills I file. I ran for office largely to try to make Kentucky a better place to live and work, and that's typically my focus. It's interesting because Northern Kentucky has always been considered to be a very pro-life area, and I don't think that that's inaccurate. But this year, I've gotten a whole lot more emails from constituents opposing House Bill 3 than I've gotten for it. I don't know what that says. Maybe they're just better motivated.
Representative Wheatley, I know that Democrats who, as a party, support access to abortion, what are these bills like to fight against when you are in that, I guess we've learned to say, extreme minority rather than super minority?
Well, they are difficult. They're mentally and emotionally difficult for my caucus, particularly. We are 17 women and 8 men, and we're not all pro. We're divided in our caucus, and as I think it could be in the Republican caucus, but they certainly couldn't never take any vote like that. But in our caucus, there is a little division, and even division amongst the kinds of restrictions, regulations, abortion rights or reproductive rights, what levels there should be. And I think that's what the Supreme Court is really struggling with. My district that I was elected in is strongly in favor. It polls in the 70s. They're in favor of reproductive rights. And I feel like I have to support that. It's not one of my issues that I campaign on or talk about a lot. I also, economic issues and pension issues and election issues, things like that are important to me. So, but this is extremely important to me, and it's important to the caucus. And it feels like, Michael, to be honest, it feels like they take a lot of these votes to cause this kind of separation, and they could run on it. And, it's very helpful in some areas of the state for the Republicans, and they can run on it and vote on it. And that's what happens. That's politics.
And you are watching the Frankfort Link live from Link NKY. I'm Michael Monks, joined by Link NKY politics and government reporter Mark Payne and state representatives Adam Koenig, Republican of Erlanger, and Buddy Wheatley, Democrat of Covington. As we start to wind this down, I want to move to a topic that was one of those stories, Mark, that seemed to be inflamed by misinformation on social media. It spread really quickly. Obviously, a lot of our eyes are on what's happening in Eastern Europe right now, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But there was something that went around related to Russian banks and the Kentucky teacher retirement system, and a suggestion that KTRS had the second largest investment in this Russian bank. And even Congressman Thomas Massie had tweeted out something that appeared to have been inaccurate. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so the tweet that went around showed that the Kentucky retirement system had the Teachers Kentucky retirement system was the second largest shareholder in Sberbank, which is a Russian bank. And obviously that was false. And Representative Massey tweeted that out. He was one of the more, famous folks that tweeted that. But they immediately tried to get ahead of it and come out and say, no, this is not true. Now, did they have money in Sberbank? Yes, they did have money in Sberbank. The amount was $15 million. The person that managed their financial account pulled that money out, I believe, February 23rd, which was just ahead of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, because they thought that, Russia was going to get sanctions, and they were correct. And as I'm sure most of you, watching the show or our representatives here tonight, or you, Michael, if you have any investments and you have a 401k, things like that, there's a chance that, or there's a significant likelihood that some of those investments are in foreign banks or foreign things that, that are just out of your control. If you have a 401k, it's a huge pool of money. There's a lot of different investments in those accounts. And so sometimes you don't know, but the teachers retirement system itself didn't control that. They didn't choose to invest money in Sberbank. It was done by one of their investment managers. And they're like, this isn't true. They weren't the largest investment. They ended up coming out, I think, a little ahead. They didn't lose the money that was reported as well.
Michael, I'll jump in. On Monday, we on the Public Pension Oversight Board, which I serve, we did receive a full report, and Mark nailed it. I mean, I can't really add anything more than that, but one of the reasons for having the Public Pension Oversight Board is to keep an eye on our pensions, and we were able to hear that kind of presentation from the executive director of KTRS, and he said pretty much that, and it was backed up by a few dollars and numbers. And they have divested from there, and as are a lot of other public pension systems from around the country. So
that's why you've got to pay attention to your news sources that fact checked before publishing. And Adam Koenig wants to tax us more. Can you believe this? It's unbelievable.
I want to give you a raise too.
Well, I want to ask you, Representative Koenig, and then you, Representative Wheatley. I think we learned a little bit about the term local control. It comes up in a lot of issues, and maybe depending on where you might fall on an issue, you might favor this more. Let me try this again as I jumble my words. You may favor local control from one issue to another, more or less, depending on what that issue is. In other words, you might use it to your strategic advantage depending on what you're debating. And I think we saw that play out just this week. And this was related to a vaccine mandate and vaccine disclosure legislation that was introduced by Representative Savannah Maddox, also a member of the Northern Kentucky Legislative Caucus, our guest last week. She's the Republican from Dry Ridge. It's House Bill 28, and it would disallow public institutions from requiring the disclosure of immunization status with regard to COVID-19, she said, while presenting this bill. Now, we got some concern about local controls. Shouldn't some of these local government organizations have the right to decide whether they do this? Representative Wheatley, you voted against this in committee. Share with us your perspective.
Well, I had the ability and took it to vote against it today on the floor, on the full vote. And it is. And Michael, you're kind of hitting a sore spot when it comes to issues that I've seen happen with the majority party, and they are the extreme majority party in some ways. But local control is a philosophy that the other side of the aisle has really put forward. over the years, and I'm going back a couple decades. And what particularly drives me crazy is to hear one of their members, and maybe a few did it, but one did it today, stand up and say, "We really support local control, but I'm voting yes on this." And the contradictions, they're there. You know, we hope people understand and see it. We try to point it out, but local control, you know, for schools and for public entities to be able to do this. You know, I was a firefighter, Covington firefighter for 20 years, and for us to not be able to have that kind of control that is necessary to daily operations of the fire department, of the police department, for the city. My wife is on Northern Kentucky Health District Board. They can't even tell their employees whether to mask or not, if they have to. There just seems to be contradictions everywhere, and it's very frustrating.
Representative Koenig, I know that there were some mixed results even among the Republican caucus on this issue. Where do you line? Where do you fall, I should say?
I voted no. I was one of 2 Republicans who voted no on that bill. Look, Representative Maddox came a long way to get it, for lack of a better term, better. But look, I spent 1 term as a Villa Hill City Councilman, 2 terms on County Fiscal Court before I came to Frankfort. I think I think I can say without fear of contradiction, I have a unblemished record in 16 years in Frankfort supporting local control. And I made a speech on Tuesday. I didn't say anything about today's vote. I made a speech on Tuesday with regards to the House Bill 51, the mask mandate bill, that said that schools could no longer have a required mask wearing. And I think it was impassioned for me. Let's put it that way. I'm not the most impassioned person ever. But, you know, and a large part of it was to the Republicans. When's the last time we said, by God, Washington knows best? Let's send more power to Washington. Let's let them tell us what to do. They know what's best for Kentucky. Well, no one in my party does that. But why on God's green earth are we doing that in Frankfort? Now all of a sudden we think we're imbued with all this terrific knowledge. No, we were right 6 months ago when we took that power away from Frankfort and sent it to the local school districts. And to bring it back to Frankfort is frankly not a conservative idea. Never has been. And I disagreed with it strongly. And today, I mean, there's a couple portions of that bill that I'm okay with, but basically same concept. You know, my cities want to have the ability to make those determinations. I'm not aware of any city in my district that is requiring you to get a vaccination. You know, I do know that like sanitation district people, sometimes they get to hang out in filth, and they need a hepatitis vaccine. Now, this bill doesn't affect hepatitis. It only affects the COVID, SARS, whatever it's called. But you just never know. And for us to take that away for local control was frankly very disappointing.
Very quickly, before we start to wrap up, a question from a viewer, J.R. Graxton, who wants to know, is the NIL signing, that's the name, image, and likeness bill that was that allows college athletes to make money off of their own personal brand. Is that the biggest legislation that has passed this session? I bet you might disagree on that while supporting the significance of it. Representative Wheatley.
I do support it, and I like a lot of things about it, but it's not very often Kentucky is first or progressive on some issue, and you know, it does seem like it's a thing well past its need, and it has been a need to be able to, for these athletes to have this kind of control of their lives, and we're hoping it becomes model legislation used around the country. But I'm supportive of it, as I believe everybody was in the Senate and everybody was in the House.
As we start to look forward to next week, Mark Payne, what are the big ticket items?
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see how that Senate budget played out. As we talked about earlier, that could potentially, go to conference committee, and then some of these other bills that are going through. And it's Senate Joint Resolution 150, something that we didn't talk about today, but that would put an end to the COVID emergency. And it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out, because that has now passed the Senate and House, and that's sitting on the governor's desk to be signed into law. And so what that resolution did was it would put an end to the COVID emergency. Well, in that bill, it was scheduled to end on March 7th. Currently, the emergency ends on April 14th. Let's say the governor takes 2 weeks to sign it. You're looking at the end of March. And so it would kind of only leave 2 weeks, for that resolution if you signed it into law. I don't know if it necessarily makes sense, but it will be interesting to see if that gets signed into law.
Okay, and I'll turn to Representative Koenig. What are you looking forward to next week, other than picking out a tuxedo for that legislators' ball that's coming up the week after?
I'm hoping that my group of 4 gaming bills, 3 of them are mine. One of them is Killian Timony's bill. That they may move next week. That's my big hope.
Representative Wheatley?
I am looking forward to advocating further for the things that are in that Senate budget bill. And one of them, we've mentioned the wet lab in Covington, which we should mention CTI and Tim Schroeder. He was huge in creating this whole concept, and also the new Ludlow High School funding. So I have to dig through that bill to make sure it stayed in there, but when it left the House, we certainly did have it. I can't imagine my Northern Kentucky senator having that pulled out. So I want to make sure it's in there, but I look forward to seeing that.
What's that funding for Ludlow?
Ludlow was one of the schools that were listed in the school construction project, and I believe it's more than $10 million.
That sounds like what was the project for? I just want to make sure.
It was a whole redo for the high school.
Gotcha.
High school, which is the oldest high school in the state, was told.
Is that right? I think Holmes High School has a sign outside. They claim to be the oldest high school in the state.
It's the oldest building in the state that serves as a full high school.
All right. Well, we'll have to verify that, but we'll take your word for it for tonight. Go Panthers anyway. Hope they get the money that they want.
Go Bulldogs.
For that renovation. I want to let everyone know, of course, that the National Weather Service is telling us that in spite of the beautiful spring-like day we had on this Thursday, rain is changing to snow Friday evening through Saturday morning. All right, we're hearing that 1 inch, 2 inches, southern counties might see 3 to 5 inches, according to some of the local forecasters. So just when you think you're out of the woods of winter, it comes roaring back. So if you are on the road tomorrow, if your lawmakers traveling home, Mark Payne traveling home, please do so safely and go get your milk and bread tonight if you can. You've been watching the Frankfort Link Live. Want to remind you that if you go to linknky.com, you can find a daily dose of Northern Kentucky exclusive news coverage. You can also sign up for our morning e-blast, The Daily Link, and also check out our podcast, The Kentucky Side. We've got 4 episodes up and a 5th episode coming on Tuesday. We drop them every Tuesday. Really good conversations about Northern Kentucky and feature reporting about businesses and other events that are taking place across our region. It's a podcast all about Northern Kentucky. We also hope you enjoyed the Link Reader. That should have dropped in your mailbox by now. We are hearing some scattered reports that perhaps it did not. If it didn't, shoot us an email at news@linknky.com and we will check on that for you. Thanks to Representative Adam Koenig, Representative Buddy Wheatley, and Link NKY politics and government reporter Mark Payne for being with us. I'm Michael Monks. We'll catch you again on the Frankfort Link Live next week. Thanks for watching.